All right, I'm excited. Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey, Tony, good to see you, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Both of you. How are you doing, Alexei?
Doing great. Yeah.
Yeah, I was really. I don't know. I know I'm supposed to be, excited about the big timers. Not that you're not a big timer, Vinny. I'm sorry, but
It's all
like
good.
like people like Louis Elizondo. Those are, for some reason, I was just like hyper. And but I really I was telling Vinny earlier. I consider him, actually, both of you, kind of the gentleman of ufology, right? When I think of people who have high ethical and moral standards in ufology, really, I mean, you guys come to mind, and that's why I wanted you to come on the show, because I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I trust you. I feel like I can trust you. There's some I don't think I can trust, but anyway, I appreciate you being here, Vinny, and Alexei.
Thank you so much. And you mentioned trust in that, and I think what it comes down to for me is, and I'm in a similar situation when I speak to people on my show and things like that. It's like there's a certain amount of give and take, from people, and I think there's like a mutual respect that you have to kind of find. And I kind of judge people on that before I speak to them. Like, I think I know that this person's going to be a certain way, and so far so good. It's not done me any injustices so far. So I appreciate that you see me in that light, Tony. So I'm more than happy to be here, and I really appreciate the invitation. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited about some of the questions, and I asked Alexei to be here because he always has such great input, and he's just like, I don't know, when I'm failing on a question, he's just like right there.
Well, thanks for
um,
having me.
when we don't, we all have different, like, I guess you could say, libraries of knowledge, right? We're all kind of different, but we all have similar interests, I think, which makes it interesting. But, and it's funny because we were talking about, off the air, about how we had, all three of us have interviewed Louis Elizondo, and he's one of the, if I had to pick a, like a national figure, the reason I asked him for an interview was because I felt like he, on the national stage, was that person I trusted the most, you know. And I know you had interviewed him also, right?
I think I've interviewed Lou about 4 or 5 times in
Oh
the last
wow,
year and
yeah.
a half. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess I don't guess I didn't really mean to get into this, but it's kind of, it really leads. Let me get the chatter out of my mouth here. It really leads me to my first question, and it was really kind of about the state of the union of ufology. It seems like, to me, so I turned 60 in October, and I've literally been interested in this subject since I was like 10 or 12 years old. You know, I was the typical kid who watched, Star Trek and the original Lost in Space. And oh, you would know this too. You remember the UFO show, the series that was British,
The
the old,
original UFO.
yeah, back in the
I, kn-
70s?
I mean, I know it. I'm a child of the late '70s, but I've watched it since. So yeah, I do
But
absolutely.
when it came to the United States as a rerun, as kind of reruns, it's like, I think it was in the 80s. I watched it. So anyway, I guess my point is that when I talk about this, sometimes people say, "Oh, you're just a design build contractor. What do you know?" And that's a good question, actually. But I guess what I have seen and witnessed is, since I've been interested in this, is that you have these periods of excitement, doldrum, excitement, doldrum, and there's always some kind of event surrounding, right? Well, I feel like we're headed back down. We went through this wave of, and this is where I get into a touchy area with Lou, supposed this disclosure. I love Lou, okay, but to make the statement that we've had disclosure was a bit, I don't know, it let me down a little bit, but still love the guy. And hopefully he'll come back and let me talk to him again. But I guess that was a long question. Where do you kind of see? Do you feel like we're kind of with the failure of Congress to produce anything? And I got in trouble over that about a year ago. I said, I don't expect much to happen. I felt like it was just going to be another way to classify information out of existence. What do you think? Is that too long of a question?
No, not too long at all. And I think it's a very interesting question. I think the one thing that I'm lucky on is that I can look at it from the peripheral of being outside of the US. I'm over here in the UK. So I look at it generally from, when it comes to the government, I try and look at it from the UK government, and a government that generally, no matter what happens, we follow what the US does. Now, the US has been more vocal on the UFO, UAP subject, I guess, since 2017, let's say. I've been following this since at least 2010. So I've seen the ups and downs that you kind of mentioned over there. I saw 2013, we had the citizen hearings on disclosure with Stephen Bassett and all those guys. I mean, I could go back to 2001 with Stephen Greer, but I was not paying serious attention to that then. I was early 20s, partying too much and all that. But in my serious research, it was more kind of 2013 and that. So yeah, I mean, I try and look at the US and try and put it back onto the UK, because the one thing that we're trying to do, or one of the things I'm trying to do here with one of the groups that I work with, that I'm a part of, UAP Media UK, is we talk to the Ministry of Defence, we talk to the UK media, and we try and give them the correct information about the way the subject is being looked at when it comes to the current studies. And that generally comes from the way that the US is leading the way in this. That then gets into the argument, are we getting truth? Are we getting legitimacy? And all that array of conversation that we see argued every day on UFO Twitter and things like that. So, it's a juggling act of many, many balls of how do we look at this subject. But I try and keep it in the context of, I just keep digging, I keep speaking to people and weighing up options behind the scenes. I feel like I'm on a bit of a tangent now and maybe have skewed away from the conversation, but I guess I'm in a position where I'm looking at the long game. I'm not looking for answers tomorrow. I know that's not going to happen. I'm being realistic about the subject. I know that science is kind of new to it, whether it be mainstream science. We all know Avi Loeb and that kind of high profile.
Are they new to it, or is the taboo or the low, dropping to where they're just now kind of wanting to get involved? I mean, 10 years ago, no, they wouldn't touch it, right?
No, they wouldn't, but they are touching it now. But then I look at people like Alexei, who we've got here with us right now, who are touching upon this scientifically, who I keep an eye on, and I've seen, putting out all sorts of theories and work on this. And I mean, it goes over my head because I'm not scientifically based, but this is what we want: we want citizen science just as much as we want academic science. And I'm not saying, Alexei, you're not academic. I'm just saying, when people look at these high profile characters such as Dr. Gary Nolan and Avi Loeb, and then we've got people like Alexei and everyone in between, like, I think it's great that the conversation is able to be had now without being stigmatized like it may have been 10 years ago. So, I'm still looking at it. Maybe it'll take another 10, 20 years before we even begin to get any kind of answer, resolution, or progression on this subject. I'm not looking at the short call. I'm looking at the long game, as it were. And as much as I like answers today or yesterday, I'm realistic about it. So I hope that kind of answers to some degree.
Yeah, I think that's a realistic answer. What do you think, Alexei? What do you think the current sort of state of the union is?
I find it interesting. I mean, just to kind of go off what Vinnie was saying, the reason why I'm not so affiliated with any institutions like Harvard or anything like that is because I started my research 10, 15 years ago,
right,
when it wasn't accepted. I put my books out on display. You get laughed out of meetings when you go to space meetings. They're talking about rocket ships, and you say, "Hey, well, why don't we use electrogravitics?" They say, "You can't do that." Like you're just making stuff up. I'm like, no, this has actually been developed since 1910. So why can't we use these technologies? And so I basically went quiet for a while until Lou Elizondo started making it public. But what I've seen, to answer the question, is basically a fading back down to being kind of hush hush again. And so I almost saw what happened as like a fishing exercise. What I mean by that is like, let's go out, let's see which public people actually understand what's happening and bring them together. I don't know, so I see it as like a fishing, and then it goes quiet, and then maybe 20 years later they'll fish again. So just a wave like that. At the end of the day, it comes down to self-exploration, because I mean, truth is only true to you. And in order for people to understand certain things, they have to have had certain experiences, right? Like certain studies, certain curiosities, even. Yeah.
Here's the thing with me, and whether we've had disclosure or not. I feel like I love Lou. Okay, I mean, I've only interviewed him twice, and I feel like he could be my brother was in the military. He reminds me a lot of him. You know what I mean? He's a great guy, and I have this weird appreciation for him, whether he was on a mission or not, right? Because I feel like he has that. The other thing is I have is this extra sensory perception of intuition, right? So, and I say I get these vibes, and it's really I'm talking about my intuition. My intuition, my gut feeling tells me that he had a job to do, and he did it well, and I appreciate that. Okay, that is a vibe I get. I can't help it, right? I can't help that. Now it sounds like a criticism, right? And when I got that vibe from the first minute I started talking with him, and then later when he said we've already had disclosure, I was really just disappointed, right? Because I'm supposed to feel like we've had disclosure, but I don't think we have. And so I don't know if that's kind of related to what we're talking about in my mind, but
Well, I think that relates to the importance, though, of citizens doing their research, because government will always be able to claim national security type things. And so to ever get a full disclosure from the government, I don't think will ever happen. I think it really does come down to citizen scientists doing their research and getting the information out there.
I agree. I think it's also always a motivational thing as well. It's like, we've had some kind of confirmation. We've had disclosure, as in we've had official confirmation. And if you're going to hold your government's feet to the fire, then you've done it because they've come out and admit that UAP are unknown. And however you look at that level of what is it, it's different to everybody. So for Lou to say that we've had disclosure, to him is one thing, to me it's another, to you guys it may be something else. It's not like, boom, we've had this thing and we've all got to look at it from the same perspective. That's not what it was about. It's about pushing us forwards to keep continuing on the journey that we're doing, for everyone to do the work that they're doing, looking forward in this. And I'm lucky enough to be in the position that I'm in, to do multiple things in this subject, both on social media and YouTube and stuff, but also behind the scenes in UAP media and privately and boots on the ground work in Colombia. I just want to be involved in it all, and from all those different aspects. Lou has helped me along the way. We've had private meetings where he's been there when I was in Colombia saying, can you do this? This would be really good. And that's completely private. And then I've had interviews with him on YouTube for everyone to see, and with the work with UAP Media, where we're trying to liaise with the Ministry of Defence and the UK government, he's been there to advise us on that as well behind the scenes. So, there are so many ways you can look at him, and most people only see him on podcasts. And so they have this one-dimensional perception of this is Lou. And it's and I get that. And I will not.
I have a lot of respect for Lou. I really do.
It's difficult. He was always in a difficult position.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Really, the bottom line is, I feel like the thing is that we don't see him much anymore.
No.
So it kind of makes me feel like that. He did have a job to do, and he kind of accomplished it. And that statement was his, victory lap. And now we don't see much from him.
Well, if you want to consider the marathon, right? He kind of passed the baton over, right?
Yes.
I'm not saying that Gary Nolan is the new Lou, but Gary Nolan.
I hope not.
You get what I'm saying? Like, there's different people now that are coming out and surfacing.
The whole Gary Nolan thing is really another whole question for me. I get this vibe that when there was this rumor going around that he was, a Nobel Prize nominee, I was like, wait a minute, the nominees aren't known. anyway, I don't want to get into all that stuff, but I get.
I think what I found
You know,
out, I think what I found out of that was Lou was always to come back in 5 years. You know, so if that takes us to, you know, 2026, 2027, let's stop putting all of this on one person. Let's start putting it on a movement where we can all get behind each other, even if we've all got different point of views, even if we all come from this subject from a different point of view. We may have the experiences, we may have the people that claim to have been abducted, we may have the people that come from only science-based, and all of these things may clash on what we generally see as UFO Twitter, but break it down, break all that away and come together in a bigger form because we all want the same answers. And I mean, God, that sounds just so fairy tale like. But
what if you're the type of person like me who thinks that some of this may be our own tech, you know, our own technology?
That's fine, and we'll get maybe we'll get those answers, but we just have to be patient.
Yeah,
because the answers will all trickle out at the same time, and maybe we'll be get to that first. Maybe we'll get to other things first. We don't know. But so many people drop out of this subject for the frustration, for the trolling, for the arguments and all that kind of thing. And perseverance, I think, is one thing. Getting off your butt from behind your computer screen and going and doing something for yourself changes your perception. I noticed that, you know, I spent 10 years. I spent 10 years plus researching off of documents and looking at it from declassified document point of view, trying to piece together these massive questions, putting answers together. And, you know, no one gets there doing that. You think that you're putting together a good portion of the overall question, but go and look into your local area, experiences and sightings. Go and travel if you've got the finances and stuff. Go and get boots on the ground and experience speaking to people in certain locations. And I know it sounds all too easy by saying it, but like I said, it could be down the road. It could be, if you've got the finances, go around the world.
No, what it does is it helps you build your own sort of database of knowledge and whether or not you're, you know, where you stand really, right? Because it's like if I it's like when I see these programs of people, you know, claiming that cave art there's some secret, you know, I'm sitting here thinking that we're underestimating the early man, that they couldn't produce art.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree.
You know, because, you know, they weren't dumb. They just didn't have the knowledge that we have. Right. So I don't know how I got off on this subject, but it was one thing I wanted to ask you about because it kind of related to some of the things you're doing. And I didn't really mean to get into it that quickly. Sorry. But have we kind of solved the State of the Union thing before we move on to the next question? I feel like I think
so,
maybe.
So do we think it's fading back away, or do we think it's staying where it is? But now we need to kind of keep the citizens, you know, that need to actually help push this forward more, continue staying strong to it, staying true. I mean, you can't wait around for people to tell you truth because you're only going to get what they want to tell you.
But a lot of people don't have access to the truth, you know, to the truth.
Well, to the equipment, for sure.
I personally think the truth is undefinable. So, you know, I don't, you know, I've always had that philosophy, and that any truth that humans are seeking is always going to fall short of the bigger truth waiting on us when we pass over to the other side, you know.
Sometimes I think it's not about actually getting the answer. It's about being involved in doing something positive towards working towards the answer. So you could sit here all day going, nothing's happening. I'm logging in every day. I'm not getting anything. And this is what I mean. We've had these ups and downs for however many decades I've been involved in the field. And that's why I say, if you can't afford to go and do anything, go out your house, walk down the road and start speaking to people on the street. I know people that do that. Hey, what do you think about UFOs? Do you think they're real? People, yeah, you might get brushed off. I know people that have done it, and people have said, oh yeah, I saw one. Have that conversation. I know it's not easy to sometimes just go and speak to strangers, but that's like a first step of getting off your butt and going and do something instead of waiting around for someone else to give you something, because that's where the depression and that, God, this subject sucks kind of attitude comes in. Go and do something about it.
I will say that you can start off by doing what we're doing, because well, I don't know how many years ago when I started. Well, I've been on YouTube for 16 years, and I don't know how long I've been doing this type of content, but I have 60. This is my 62nd show. So I guess what I'm trying to say there is that it has brought local people. I get a lot of ribbing on my construction sites. Hey, but it is a conversation starter, right? So
Yeah.
you can start off by chatting with people like you and get the word out there, and then locally, like you're saying, it kind of helps to get open the doors to future conversations. So I wouldn't say that people who are vlogging aren't doing anything, but you have to follow through with it, right?
Yeah,
It's like
absolutely.
the efforts that Alexei was involved with the launching of the balloons and that type of thing. He had to hike over, traverse over mountains to go find the balloon. That's effort.
That was
And
fun.
with your efforts, we're going to talk about your efforts. Where your travels and to Central America and those. I thought we'd get into those after we kind of think. What we think about
I
this
can't wait
question.
to talk about. I mean, the one thing I will say about just being able to talk about it late, maybe in your local area. An example I will quickly give is that my daughter's 5 years old. She just started school. I collect her from the school gate, and I end up talking to parents. They're like, "Oh, so what do you do?" And I'm like, okay. So, and I'm not afraid to say I look at unidentified aerial phenomena. I host a podcast. And they're like, "Oh my God, that's amazing. Like, wow, that's so different." And the feedback on that is incredible. And the conversations that have come from it in the last 6 months have been incredible. So this is where we're at. It's not like this guy's a weirdo. Like, it goes to show like these are the things that just being around your area, at the school gate, at your job, and that the taboo, the stigma is slipping slightly. It may be not the same in every position, but don't be afraid. This is what I say to people out there. Don't be afraid to spark the conversation and go from there.
Yeah, and what I have found is that even though these people rib me a little bit, they're still interested in talking about it once they break the taboo themselves. Of the ribbing is kind of the way they break the ice to me.
Yeah,
right?
It's the banter.
Yeah, and it's the band, right, which is common on construction sites.
Yeah.
I have a pretty thick skin, but yeah. What I don't know how in your daily life, Alexei, do you have people that approach you because you're probably pretty well known locally or there in the area, right? Tampa.
I mean, it's weird for me. I mean, I'll go out to different places and they say like, what do you do? I'm like, well, I'm an artist inventor. What have you done? Well, I just finished writing 550 pages of physics that talks about interdimensional technologies. And they're like, wait, what? I'm like, yeah, but so it always starts with an interesting conversation because I always start with like the human senses and like our ability to even perceive reality to begin with. And from there, people automatically understand it's like, okay, this guy, he's not just making stuff up. He's very logically thinking about what's going on, and the fact, always going back to Lou Elizondo at this point, the fact that he came out and said, this stuff is real, right? Like that in itself was such a big step and a big change in all the different people's perspectives. And now you have like the UAP task force. You've got like all the different things coming out. I think it's great personally.
Well, again, I'm not. This is not a criticism, but to say it's real could mean that it's real. Either way, real technology, our technology, or a real alien. You know what I mean? It's not really an answer.
Well, that's what. Yeah, my first videos they talk about electrogravitics. They talk about John Searle. They talk about all the man-made technologies, anti-gravity technologies that we've been developing since like the early 1900s that people just don't know about because they've been classified as national security. But those types of technologies have been around, in my opinion, for a very long time.
I think what I would find interesting is that when I was spending many years researching this, thinking it's some kind of alien phenomena, now I'm further away from that than I've ever been. I think this comes down to something way more intricate, way more hard to understand, but it's there. And that's why I'm here to be a part of it and do whatever I can to help push the conversation forward. And this is why, I think we will have to fall back on science, whether it be citizen science or academic science, because I think with the questions that are coming up from the more and more people look at this, that it's broadening the topic, and it's not just these are extraterrestrial gray aliens traveling from Zeta Reticuli to here. It's become more than that, where it adds into quantum physics and all sorts of things. And I could be wrong, but that's the way it looks to me. And I think this is why I now do a show on YouTube and ask questions to other people so that I can start learning things, because I'm not science-based, man. I'm a skateboarder, 30 years in, and that's my background, like.
Oh man, I gotta show you my skateboard.
Dude, that was my thing.
Awesome.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I've got a skateboard right here. Hold on.
I kind of knew that's kind of.
Are you a Mick West fan then?
No. I mean, I'm not.
I'm just kidding. I'm kind of a Mick. I'm on the.
Yeah, I see. Mick. Look at that. That is crazy.
I don't know if
that's
you've
like
seen
some
this.
kind of hoverboard or something.
I have an electric model too.
I have. I'm kind of familiar with some of the stuff you did. That's kind of why I brought it up. And this is the thing. Like, I've always been pigeonholed in my life by, that's the kid that skateboards. He's nothing, But I skated at a high level for many years. I owned my own skateboard company for many years, and people just think that they're pigeonholed, and I get that in this subject. And I feel like that's changing nowadays, and that's why I'm lucky to be able to relate that kind of aspect of being involved in something that's slightly off of your 9-to-5 job and things like that. And
I think it takes a certain type of person too. And like when you think skater, most skaters are very realistic people.
Sure.
Like they're very realistic. Same with construction guys. Like they're very realistic. They know what truth is and not, in a way. Like,
well, we're kind of no BS. We're kind of no BS kind of people, and that's why we don't have a, we're experts at BS, right? So when we hear it, it's like it resonates, and so when certain people say certain things, you're like, wow, come on now, But again, I guess to me it kind of boils down to kind of two options with the what is it, and one of them's kind of scary, not really scary, but let's say to me there's a 50-50 chance that it's our technology, right, or maybe a mix of our technology was spurred on by, maybe we did have a few crashes. I don't know. Maybe we did find something and back engineered. I don't know. But the other side of it is that maybe it's too stark. It's that maybe it is really too frightening for the average American, I started to say American family on this earth to handle, because you have to wonder, if it wasn't, why haven't we had real disclosure already? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. If I've spoken to people before where if it really is that scary, they're like, I just don't want to know. I don't want to know. And I'm the complete opposite. I'm like, I do want to know. My daughter's 5 years old. I want to know what kind of world I'm leading her into, and I don't want to be blindfolded by, cushions of the fake truth to make it palatable. I want it to be realistic, and if it's going to be tough, it's going to be tough, and I can prepare her for that. I don't care about me and what I'm going to find out for the rest of my future. Forget that. I'm looking forward, and that's all. That's the whole reason why I do what I do.
The thing I would hate to do though is I would really want some sort of real disclosure before I start trying to talk to my kids about it.
That'd be nice.
You're gonna, if it's just our own technology, and here we are, teaching our children something, and they're having nightmares about it. You've got a whole different problem going on there.
I mean, yeah, that's the kind of conversation where I start thinking about, if it really is genuinely our technology, then it blows my mind for the cases that I researched from the 50s, from witnesses that I have on record who were pilots in the 50s who experienced objects flying at multiple thousands of miles per hour and saw them. These are guys on the record. And I know witness testimony isn't the be all and end all. In fact, it's really not a lot of data, but add that with radar data. I mean, there's a case I'm thinking of in particular that I've spent time looking into, 1956 Bentwaters, Lake and Heath here in the UK. hearing these guys on the record, my colleague, Dr. David Clark, was the guy interviewing them, saw it in their eyes. Like, I see these guys' eyes. I know what they're saying. I've seen the radar data. It's available. Like, how can you quantify that kind of thing for being our technology in the 1950s? I mean, it's crazy. It's the same thing as, you know, people talking about Nazi flying saucer tech and craziness like that.
Yeah, but then you the other side of that is that I've got two of my best friends, retired Air Force. One is a lieutenant colonel, and I used to talk. I mean, I've known them since I was a kid. Well, growing up in high school and stuff, and I watched them go through the evolution of, you know, becoming a pilot and all. And so I would joke with him when he would come back. He would fly a T-38 back to Chattanooga to hang out with his family, and we'd get together. And I would say, "Hey, Mike, you know, what's going on? Have you seen any UFOs or and I would say, what's the I would try to get him to just tell me where the next hot spot was going to be and this kind of stuff. And of course, he wouldn't answer that. He did tell me in like 1990 that we should worry about North Korea. but
fair enough.
But as far as the UFO thing, he said, he had never seen anything, like that. And the other pilot is a family member, and so I know those are just two anecdotal.
That's what we have to deal with 99% of the time is anecdotes, isn't it? And we're led to believe that if you're of a high ranking position doesn't necessarily equate to the position that you're in as far as need to know. It could be that special access programs and the people that are read into those who work between the military and the kind of private entities are middlemen. They're not the biggest and the most high ranking. They're the people that can work within the gray areas that link the white world to the black world. And they're just people that aren't going to talk, who might just fritter away over 30 years and nobody even cares or even hears and knows about their names. I mean, it's so much of it is anecdotal, and so much of it, and my belief system, even now looking into it, trying to be neutral, there are biases in there. Yeah, I believe there is probably some kind of non-human intelligence somewhere, but I still try and keep it realistic by doing the work or speaking to people from the scientific level and work my way up and cancel everything out before I get to that point of being, yeah, this is definitely crazy or weird. But there are still little biases in there, and I admit to that openly just because of the situation that I've been in and people I've spoken to, conversations I've had, and yeah.
One of the reasons I brought up my friend who is a retired lieutenant colonel, he went to fly. After that, he flew for 20 years as a commercial pilot.
Okay.
And he passed away a couple of years ago. But anyway, I would ask him when I meant to mention this, when I would ask him kind of in a kidding way about hotspots, he would say, "I can't see anything. If I told you anything," he would get, what I mean? Some of these guys, and mostly military guys I know, my brother, he's not with us any longer either. Rest in peace, my brother Mike. He's my brother, and he wouldn't tell me anything about what they did. And so the reason I'm bringing that up is because I believe that is really ingrained in the members of the military. And so when I see the people who have come out and are speaking about it, they seem to be specific people. There's not a large group of people. There's just, like, to me, what seemed like a small group. And so you have to wonder, I don't know, am I being too skeptical to think that maybe they were part of the overall information when I say information campaign, I'm not giving up on the fact that it could be that needed to happen. In other words, I'm a fan of these information. I'm a fan of Lou's because I realize that sometimes the job he had to do as an intelligence officer had to be done. We might not like it, right? We might not like the fact that we can't get a UFO to land in my backyard. But there was some reason. There was some reason for the whole thing. And I don't think people can't get around this. They think I'm being critical, or I'm saying that it's disinformation. It could be that in the long run, we were glad that it was an information campaign. You know what I mean?
I do. And I think from my point of view is that, I've had pilots come to me because they've said I was inspired by the work of people like Lou Elizondo coming forward, but I'm not ready to come forward myself. And I'm like, that's absolutely fine. I'm just happy that you're talking, even if it's off the record behind the scenes. And then, recently I went on the record with a pilot on my channel who for the first time is a commercial 747 pilot, a captain for 20 years who finally felt he was able to come forward with the story. He'd seen things for 20 years and he'd catalogued them and he'd even researched them. He'd reported some behind the scenes outside of his organization. He was very clever about it, but he never wanted to come forward. He's quite a public figure in the photography world for aviation photography. But because of the stuff that Lou Elizondo had done with the stuff that came out in 2017 with David Fravor and everything, and then more recently with all these pilots that were seeing these racetrack UAP, whatever they may be, whether they be Starlink or whatever, that's kind of irrelevant. That the fact that pilots were talking publicly made this guy come out to me, and he's got some extremely interesting images that are being analyzed by Gaipan in the EU and Europe and that. So pilots are talking and they're starting to come forward, and that can only be a good thing.
I know, but they're not supposed to talk. I mean, they're not right, because that's what I was told by the two
Maybe
guys
they're
I know
not. They are
retired pretty high. They were saying, no, it's a lifelong oath. You can't disclose. So when I hear that from them, and I see these pilots coming out who are only been out of the service for how long? What was his name? Fravor? Is it Fravor?
David Fravor, yeah.
Yeah. How long had he been out of the Air Force?
I wouldn't know exactly, but it was a good decade, I'd imagine, at least a decade. Yeah.
So 10 years doesn't, you're not relieved of your oath of secrecy after. I don't think you are. I don't think there's a time, an expiration on your oath.
But wait, what was it? But then we have to ask the question: what was his oath of secrecy? What was he divulging from the Nimitz encounter that was top secret? Because he was never told or questioned after the incident that you have to remain silent on this case, because then it would be like saying, well, you can't tell anybody that you ever flew a plane off the edge of an aircraft carrier. Do you see? There's intricacies about that people think, well, if it's if it's a top secret project that you were told not to talk about, then fair enough. But they never were. And maybe that's kind of a clever way of playing it down.
You can't disclose even like you can't disclose anything. You can't say I was training in the middle of the Pacific. I can't. You can say I was training in the Pacific, but you can't say where you can't. That's the way it was given to me, told to me. But anyway, I don't want to see when I talk like this, people say, "Oh, you're a skeptic." No.
I think it's a great.
I'm a lifelong believer in that. There's life all throughout, permeating the universe. It's just
and that's
endless amounts of life.
I think the great thing about this conversation is that it's always like asking questions, because we don't know, I don't know, you don't know, and I think it's great that we're debating that in a pleasant kind of way. I'm friends with a couple of the guys that were on the Princeton at that time, and I still speak to them regularly and go, what was it like? And they're just like, do you know what? It was nothing. It was just, we're just there. We're on this thing. We didn't hear much. We didn't see much, but it was this big deal. And now it's an even bigger deal. Like, there was nothing really to it at the time. So for them to talk about it now, it's like they're still talking about something that wasn't a big deal. So, that's how it seems to them.
But how many people, you know what I mean? How many people were training during that time who are not talking? There was more than one or two pilots, right, that were being trained. And maybe I'm dwelling on this too much, but
no, we can. And that's the thing. We can dwell on that, because we know that the 3 of the 4 pilots that kind of went out and looked at the Tic Tac, let's say, we know that one of them will never talk. One of them, Jim Slate, did talk for 1, possibly 2 interviews back in 2017. He promised to never come back out. Then we're left with David Fravor and Alex Dietrich, who eventually did come out. I mean, the intricacies of that story became quite prevalent in the last 12 to 18 months. So we know that. And we could still dig deeper into who
No, I
saw
mean,
what, did what, and that's the direction I don't think we should look at.
yeah, no, I'm just saying that there were multiple. They're saying that this is an everyday occurrence. Some of the pilots are saying that this basically happens every day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, I'm not a skeptic. Please, people. I'm just I just want to go down. I just want to be led down the correct path. I don't want to be, not really want to be led down a path. I just want, if someone's going to come out to say, I'm the guy who knows, and the information they give me, I want it to be honest and forthcoming. What do you think about that, Alexei? I mean, the overall. Do you think there should be more pilots? If it is okay to talk, don't you think? Do you think there should be more pilots coming and saying?
I mean, I don't know. I think the reason why more pilots are talking, obviously, is because it's been destigmatized to where they don't lose their jobs, and then they're not evaluated by like psychologists afterwards, right? So it's actually like, okay, this guy actually saw something. He's not insane, so he can actually speak on it. But I agree with your statement you made earlier that a large portion of them are probably man-made. But at the same time, there's definitely the non-man-made aspect that, dates back all the way to ancient times. So to say they're all man-made, I think is too big of a jump.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying.
I'm wondering. What I'm wondering is if, because when you see these videos of guys standing on the bow of a ship recording what they think are UAPs, they're not very excited about it. They're just like reporting it as if it's another event, another night, And my question is, why aren't there freaking chain guns firing it? Why don't we ever see video of them trying? Are we just going to let drones fly right in the center of our, our naval positions in the
Well, I mean, that really leads to this question, kind of for Vinny. Is there actually more UAP interaction going on at this time, or has our equipment just gotten better, or do we have more drones?
I think it's probably a bit of both. I mean, I can only go on word of mouth from what I've heard and been told. So without evidence, physical evidence, data, that's what I thrive on, is physical data and evidence. That's why a lot of the cases that I look into back in the 50s and stuff like that I mentioned earlier do have multiple data points, where it's not just testimony. It does have radar and that. But we are led to believe that a lot of these cases that we talk about these days, when it comes to Nimitz, when it comes to the 2015, 2019 incidents, we're told there are multiple sensor systems picking up this information, but we don't get to see that information. And that's where it becomes problematic in the conversation, because people are like, well, okay, we're just supposed to believe that. And that's it. For us as a citizen researcher, that's kind of our brick wall that we hit. So I see the difficulties and I see the frustrations from people in the community where we're like, nah, it's just nonsense. They're just saying that. It's the same thing the government and the military have said for years, where they're just lying. They're leading us along the garden path, blah, blah, blah. I get that. I get that frustration. But for me, I'm still going to keep going and waiting and trying to speak to people and seeking out sources, let's say, and hoping that eventually we get that information. But again, it's going to be a very long process, and I'm not in it for the short game. I'm in it for the long game. So, I mean, maybe
you mentioned that you kind of strayed away from the ET hypothesis. Where do you stand now? I guess is the question I have for you.
That's a really good question, man. Well, because like for so many years, I was from the outside looking in, it was the extraterrestrial hypothesis was it's ET, it's alien. Whereas now a lot of people within this subject know that we have this interdimensional aspect. We have this crypto-terrestrial where they're here, but they're outside of our field of perception in some kind of other biosphere or another realm or something, however you want to phrase it. So, yeah, I mean, that list almost seems to go on and on, where something new is added all the time. And to me, maybe some of those have jumped above the extraterrestrial hypothesis, but that's kind of not where I put my focus. I put my focus more on about how do we get more information out so that we can answer which one of them it is, rather than just sort of look at them and go, it could be this, it could be that. I'm not going to sit and waste my time on that. I'm going to go, what can I do? How can I figure this out? Who can I speak to? How can I get out there? And, you know, so I'm kind of working at that very bottom level to even begin to start asking those questions. It's yeah, it's a
yeah. I mean, that's where that's where all my work has taken me to, is to the interdimensional hypothesis.
right.
Mostly, yeah. I agree with that personally, but again, like, I don't know for a fact. I don't have all the equipment everyone else has, and I don't have those experiences. But for my personal research and studies, and just logically going step by step and thinking about it, it's like, well, there's different dimensions that exist within time, and you can even say there's a less dense version of Earth and a more dense version of Earth,
Right.
based off of that.
And this is the thing, when you start hearing that from multiple angles, and you start thinking, well, these potentials and possibilities add more weight to what people are saying than this simple fact that how are these beings traveling across interstellar space? It can't just be at light speed. It's got to be multiples of light speed. And then you start going, that becomes way far out. And then the interdimensional hypothesis is a lot more palatable than that. So it flips, and you're like, okay, well, that makes more sense.
Well, for me, it's my intuition tells me that it's a combination of all of it, right?
Maybe
because you've got objects like a Muamua that could very easily. I mean, why is Albie so interested in a Muamua? And then this other thing, he's already got several $1 million to do a trip out to the ocean to collect samples from the other. I forgot what it was, what they named it, the other meteorite that fell. So those were obviously interstellar objects, right? So for me, it's like, for me, the universe is teeming with so much life and so many possibilities. It can be a combination of all of that.
Just to go off that for a second, where on Earth can you not find life? Is a simple question, right? Like, life exists within
the universe.
No, just Earth. Let's start on Earth and then expand the thinking. Like, life exists in every nook and cranny on Earth. You've got extremophiles, the deepest part of the oceans, living off hydrothermal vents. You've got other beings living off the chemical reactions within rocks. You've got some that live in sulfur pools. Life as we know it is a very human perspective of life, right? And so when you go out into realms that are further from Earth, you're going to have life that's not even we wouldn't be able to tell it's life, because we're so used to Earth life. That's it.
We look at so many things in an anthropomorphical way that it's outside of our possible realm of thinking sometimes. And I know that makes us sound dumb and stupid, but it isn't. It's more of a case of, well, what if? It's everything has to stay on this proverbial table until we can just tick it off and knock it off. That's why I think it's gonna be a long haul before we start even whittling it down to the kind of where we're getting some kind of answers. And hey, like I said earlier, I'm in it for the long game. Some people aren't. They get frustrated. They find big disagreements in other people's hypotheses, and then we see, lo and behold, on Twitter and that's when attacking starts happening and all that kind of nonsense. And that's what I steer way clear of, because I think the best thing to do is have these kind of conversations where it's person in person. And I love the fact that so many people have different points of view, because it's great that it shows that everybody's thinking on multiple levels and in different ways and stuff. And then eventually, maybe a few years down the line, we get the same people back in the same conversation and we have a different one, and that's great. So, why do people get so frustrated and start attacking each other? And there's so many aspects to this phenomena that don't get to that point where it makes you angry. Like,
I think if people were more interested on a personal basis than and don't get me wrong, I'm a capitalist too, but I think if people were more interested in on a personal basis than a commercial basis, then we would all get along better. It's like me. I don't make my income comes from my business. I don't make, I don't seek to make any money off of the UAP thing. I just think it's one of the most interesting topics of in humanity. So absolutely. I have a hard time staying away from it.
Totally.
And, people like you and Alexei make it more interesting.
I appreciate that, man.
It's awesome. And like I was saying earlier, there are for me, I put this, the people who are honestly making a living on the subject. Then there's the other people who are who are intentionally misleading people to make money on the subject. So there you've got to sometimes those get there's a gray line between them, or we can't. It's hard to discern.
That reminds me of an interview that I saw that recently came out, and I don't, not trying to throw anyone under the bus, but I think the guy did a lot of work for Gaia, and I think a lot of people have seen his interview that came out recently.
Oh, Corey Good.
Yeah.
Was I not supposed to say?
It doesn't really matter, but like,
is that taboo?
So that,
yeah, but you even see how that story's changed since. The fact that he admitted to some of the things that he'd said about the Dark Fleet and the 20 and back programs that he mentioned, that he said that they were part of his imagination and that. But now people are saying, well, he only said that to protect his IP, his intellectual property, but he didn't mean it because it's still real. And like, people are seriously still going beyond that to still believe that. And I mean, how can you get through to certain people?
So there is a level of misinformation out there, and there are the in quotes charlatans, doing their thing. Like,
it's crazy.
Well, and the thing that disappoints me about that too is that all that can't help but sort of cast a bad light on any kind of it's like you guys have a real tough time now ahead of you. I mean, again, when I look at you, I have a different thought than when I look at. To be honest with you, those types of people always, again, my intuition told me that some of the things they were talking about were just fruity. That no human would be involved that deeply, right? Yeah. So that was just an intuitive thing. So I'm not upset with that guy. It doesn't bother me that he lied, but I do think it makes it tougher on other people who are trying to do honest documentaries, and conferences and things like that. So
sure. That's a fine line, isn't it? I've done work, and we haven't mentioned it yet, but phenomenology, we filmed a full series that we had to put out, for people to rent or buy. And we had to, just because of the money put out, and we didn't say you've got to buy this. We put out episode 1 for free to give them, like, if this is something you like episode 1 of, maybe you'll like the rest and go and buy it and stuff like that. And it's tough when money gets involved. Of course it's going to be tough, and I hate it. I only monetize my YouTube channel slightly for advertisements. I don't promote super chats and all that kind of stuff. If it comes, it comes, and that's great. But it's a minefield when you start dealing with money in this subject. And yeah.
But I mean, I think people can sense the difference in people.
Yeah.
Like I sense that you're more ethical and honest, and you know what I mean? I think people can sense that intuitively. I don't know. I can't. I don't know.
I think I agree. I agree, because I do the same when I watch other channels, and you can see when it's people that have to stop the whole show to say, wait a minute, you can support us by doing this and this and this and this. It's like, no.
And there's nothing wrong with making a living. I think
absolutely not.
As long as you're ethical, if you're doing it ethically and you honestly believe what you're putting out, to me, that's the intent. Motive is everything, on these things. And I choose to watch the ones that I'll do research. That's why I asked you to come and join us tonight, because, I just, some just seem like they're just, anyway, I'm rambling about it. But
I guess I have a follow-up question.
Go ahead.
What case is the best case or example that got you into thinking the interdimensional hypothesis?
Wow.
I wish I could show my screen, because that was the next question I had on my list.
I think I'd love to be able to give you a case. I can't. I can give you more. It's more conversations. I think coming out of 10 years of research and not being a public figure in this community, then coming out into the community, starting a channel and starting to have conversations, start not twisting, that's a really bad word, but like flipping my mind and changing these possibilities to go, these documents that I spent 10 years looking at, none of it actually said about an entity or a ship that was coming from interstellar space physically. And so I started thinking about all these other conversations that I'd had, which were about interdimensional, crypto-terrestrial, ultra-terrestrials, all these kind of things. Like, then I started putting those into these documents that I'd read, and like, wait a minute, some of them really do fit in there, and some of them make more sense. So it's kind of an amalgamation of multiple things, putting it back into my old research that kind of then started realigning like what is sitting at the top of my list at that time, if you know what I mean. So it's a very bizarre way of looking at it, but coming from a non-scientific point of view, because I'm just not scientifically inclined, it was like, what makes sense? Just what do I think makes sense to me, kind of thing. And I guess that's what it was. It was more conversations and about being open to more possibilities rather than just talking about things, because, you know, even the government were talking about ET and aliens a lot in historical data, and that never sat right with me. But there we are, you know, and here we are now having a different conversation. So I hope that answers kind of your question.
Oh, that was perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Do you? I was going to ask you the same question. Actually, my question was, what was your best case? I was just going to say UFOs, but Alexei, I mean, you kind of have a different experience, I think, than a lot of people. But recently, this is what's funny, and I'll let you think about that for a second. I'll give you my best case. I'm not exactly a big fan of the person who's producing this, but you know, Barack Obama came out and said that, or someone came out and said that he's going to be producing a documentary or something on Betty and Barney Hill. And when I remember coming up as a teenager, and you know, and that to me always impressed me as a case of what did they have to gain? What did they stand to gain? They had everything to lose, right? That typical that couple really wasn't going to gain anything from bringing
Right.
that story. They had more to lose than gain, and I don't know that to me that case. Well, besides the Zimbabwe schoolyard case, I think those two. Is it Zimbabwe or Zambia?
Yeah, Zimbabwe, yeah.
Zimbabwe,
yeah.
So, you know, some of the cases where you have, you know, children and you know, 50, you know, people witnessing, you know, in that case, people witnessing that something happened there, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it was October 2021. I went down to the National Archives in the UK, where a lot of the historical UFO records that have been released publicly are still in hard copy only. They're not available digitally. So you have to make an appointment, go down there. And the process to actually get in and look at files is very technical. I managed to get in there, look at some files, and I found schoolyard cases from the 1970s and 80s in England and Wales, with multiple children seeing objects that have never been made public. And I mean, and they're fascinating. And again, it's testimony, it's witness testimony. So I guess what I've learned in the last year is to go back on a case that I mentioned earlier, which is the 1956 Lake and Heath Bentwaters case. And it's called Lake and Heath and Bentwaters because these are two RAF sites that both picked these objects up on radar. We have the pilot testimony, double radar data. And you know, this was an area of the UK where things were happening and seen for quite a few years around the 50s and 60s. And
is that the Rendlesham Forest case, or is that
no?
Okay.
That's the thing. It's still the same area. It's the Rendlesham base, and it's the same bases involved in the cases in 1980. But these are lesser known cases from almost 30 years previously.
Right.
So you can link them through with some of the sites that were involved with laser weapon technology. Early days, 1950s. That's a whole different story altogether. And there's a lot of files in the UK here that have been destroyed. So you could be researching a case here in the UK and get a file number, ask for the file number. The MOD can't find it. You appeal. Eventually, you find out that it's been destroyed. And some of those cases really throw up ominous reasons as to why the hell have you destroyed that? Because we know that it shouldn't have been, for many, many, many reasons. And this goes into some of our work that we're still doing now on the Calvin case that we worked on earlier this year when we released the photograph, and man, it's crazy. It's
so
crazy.
do you have a similar process that we have here with the Freedom of Information Act?
Yeah, very much
Yeah.
so. But there are still other things like destruction of documents. For any document that's destroyed after a certain amount of time, there is a document produced to say that another document's been destroyed, and that's kept on record. And these things sometimes don't exist.
But you're saying that in some cases you have to physically go to the location, and actually I think I trust that process more because sometimes I think the documents that we're getting through FOIA are just, maybe manipulated to send a message, to send out the message that they want you to see.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know.
I do. No, absolutely.
I guess I'm a little suspicious of it.
No, I totally understand
action.
that. My colleague, Dr. David Clark, actually worked with the Ministry of Defense on releasing their last batch of UFO files in the 2008, 9, 10 period. Massive release. He was down at the National Archives working with them on how to release these documents. And I'm still working with him now on cases like Calvin and that. And when he gets to a point where he's like, this isn't right, and he knows the intricacies and the inner workings of the National Archives, then we know that something's up. And this is what we've been finding on a few cases here and there. Destroyed documents that almost point to some kind of cover-up. I mean, that's taking that next step of guesstimation, but my goodness, it points in no other direction almost.
Well, again, I guess I'm just a big fan of the whole this is what's weird about me. I love the I love the I don't know what do you call it? Not the espionage, but the spy stuff. I love the intrigue, and for me, like if there were the destroyed documents, I get this, I have this image of, a CIA guy going and destroying documents, and he's accomplished his goal of preventing national secrets from being. You see what I mean? You can see why I have. I don't call it anything disinformation. If it's a disinformation campaign, I just label it an information campaign because. Someone had a goal to destroy that document, and someone had a goal to obtain that document, and one side won, one side lost.
Yeah.
Maybe it seems like too much. I'm making it too much of a game, but
no. It's definitely a game. I mean, some of the cases, and one thing I probably really should have mentioned on the 1956 Lake and Heath Bentwaters cases, we've got a US base in the UK, so we've got records from the UK Ministry of Defense. We've also got records from the US Air Force. Now, when you freedom of information request records here in the UK, you get a certain batch. When you get the documents from the US and mirror them up, things are missing, things don't correlate. So you start painting a picture of like, why can't we get this and why can't we get that? And so many questions are raised and asked about small aspects that really point to like, well, this small part of these documents together points to an object that is still traveling at 4,000 or 5,000 miles per hour in 1956. That's captured on radar. That's seen stopping in midair and then speeding off again. Like, I mean, so many of these things, and you're like, what is that, man? Like, come on, dude. Like where do you go from there? Like,
right. But if that was let's say it was a piece of technology somehow miraculously that the UK had or we had,
it could be,
and we just don't want a foreign enemy to know.
Yeah, exactly. So
so somebody did a good job, Lou, or somebody did a good job of.
I get that, but
and that's why I love both sides of that fence and I don't get upset about this whole thing with the government. Some people are just, you'll see them on UFO Twitter every day. Oh, it's day 2, it's day 3. It's day 4 since we don't have any, you know what I mean? We don't have anything.
I do, and I don't mind that. Everyone deals with it in a different way, and if it's a way that I don't deal with it, it doesn't bother me.
Well, I'm not criticizing those people. I'm just saying that you may not ever see. You need to get into the mindset that you may not see it. You may not have anything come out of that.
That's very true.
Somebody's going to win. Somebody's going to win the information battle, and it might not be Congress people because they're temporary politicians.
I wouldn't expect it. I almost expect it not to come out, just like Blue Book, just like the Condor Report, I believe is what it was called.
Yeah.
Now we're having the modern day version, in my opinion. But I don't know, maybe more information will come to light. But just the simple fact that they've admitted that there are things flying around that they don't know, I think that never happened before.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not sure though. Yeah.
No,
but it could be easily be that I don't know what it is, but the person who invented it knows what it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
When someone, I'm not going to pick on Lou anymore because I love the guy, but when he said we don't know what it is, maybe he doesn't really know what it is, but somebody may know what it is.
Well, that's why I started speaking more. I was like, hey, these guys know more than what they're saying. Like, we got to start talking physics here. We need to start talking about the interdimensional hypothesis.
Yep, absolutely, completely agree. And that's the thing. I speak to people, and I'm more than happy to speak to people that come at this from every single different angle, whether they're coming at it from an abduction point of view, whether they're coming at from an alien point of view, whether they're coming from a physics point of view. No matter what, I will always have the conversation with someone as long as they stay respectful.
Yeah.
That's where I draw my line, because none of us have the actual final answer. And to me, at the end of the day, that's all it comes down to.
Well,
a lot of people can't get past that point, and they say, "Oh, you've got to see it from my point of view. I'm right," and that's when craziness starts happening. And we've all seen it.
And the most frustrating thing is the compartmentalization, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, but we can get. I've been lucky enough to have conversations with people who are, let's say, on the inside. Now, could that just be them feeding me pure disinformation? Yes, but I don't talk about it publicly. I add that to my table in front of me of potentialities of what it could be, and to be honest, it probably confuses me even more. But I'm very confident there are a few people on the inside who are just as frustrated as we are, who probably don't have any kind of power to get to that final push because of past high-level, old guard secrets and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just not willing to kind of give up on the government, this one-word government, which is actually, when you break it down, is multi-millions of employees. Let's be realistic. It's a small, grey, compartmentalized area within the government, within the military-industrial complex that too many people are just like, yeah, don't trust the government. And I kind of can't look at it like that from conversations I've had and dealings I've had. So
yeah, I personally think that there were some terms that are related to our government, our U.S. government, that had that were taboo even more than the word UFO, and one of them is the word deep state, right? Because when you say that, you automatically think of conspiracy theorists, but really all we're talking about are those people who are there. They're lifers, right? They're the people who work with the special access programs. They're the people, who are probably really controlling the money. You know what I mean? There are people that work within our government that nobody knows about. That are,
there are so many terms like that.
But you can't talk about it. Just I even feel weird even talking about it. You see, I don't feel weird talking about UFOs, but I feel weird. I feel like, you know what I mean? So I feel like that people in the government have done a good job of sort of putting out this information campaign about, you don't talk about the deep state. You don't talk about the people running things behind the scenes.
You don't talk about the founding fathers of America, the people who funded that.
Yeah, but and then
politicians,
and you hear phrases like the Collins elite, and these are supposed to be old guard people within high-ranking military positions related to the Congress and Senate who are highly religious, who have really strict beliefs that this is demonic and things like that. So, of course, they don't want this talked about in the higher echelons of government or military. This is absurd. We've got to keep it strictly religious, and so no, we're not going to talk about that. And that's half the conversation within the arguments that are happening within the Pentagon, the intelligence community, the Senate, the Congress, and it's a whole different world.
See, there's another example of an information campaign, right? This thing where religious people are upset about UFOs. Well, as a Christian, I believe that God created the entire universe, right? And that all life, I believe that the creators spewed out of his mouth the ingredients for life, and the universe was born. So why would I be upset that? For me, that feels like another taboo thing that was created to, oh, religious people, you know you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think I spoke about this on with Project Unity, talking about like how they're so closely intertwined that it almost combines church and state at that point if they start saying these are interdimensional beings and they relate to all the different religions. I think that's a slippery slope for government to then tell people this stuff, because now you've combined church and state.
I grew up in the most Southern Baptist church you can find in Tennessee, okay? And I have no issue. To me, Genesis explains it all. So, and I'm not overly religious, right? I'm still open to. I've studied Hinduism, Islam, all the, Jainism. I've studied all these, and I think eventually we will find that the creator is a combination, or there is one creator, and that we're probably all worshiping the same one. So I'm not trying to claim that the King James version is the whole thing. I'm just saying, I think if there was another misinformation, there's multiple levels of misinformation. And one of them is that Christians have a problem with, aliens or whatever.
That's it. It seems like there are so many levels of that though, that are talked about. And yeah.
Well, I know, but to me, if you see the people who, for me, obviously there's a difference between religion and spirituality. The people I see saying that these things are demonic or whatever are typically like leaders of a religion. So maybe they have a responsibility, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't think the popes came around, right? But maybe if you ask whoever was the head of Southern Baptist Convention, I think they agree with me now. But you know what I mean? I kind of feel like that some people have motives, and they're the people who are saying certain things that we're, as a Christian, I'm supposed to believe.
And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is removal of the bias, because we're all born into these cultures, we all live within them, and so just constantly, subconsciously, we're being trained to think certain ways. And that, for me, that was like one of the biggest things is remove the bias and start from scratch. Right? Like we're all the same. We're all humans on Earth. Start from there, move forward.
Absolutely. And some people find that a lot harder than others.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, I still have biases that run through some of the conversations that I have, and I'm very aware of that. And that's why I'm just realized that that's just a human trait. I try my hardest, but I still have these beliefs that creep in, and I really try and keep it out of my work and my research, but it happens. It falls in, and I've learned in certain aspects to try and keep that away, but it slips in every now and again. The most prevalent was going out to Colombia and looking at a phenomenon that's been reported for 400 years, trying to think like, right, this is not UFOs, this is not UFOs, and then speaking to different people about their beliefs, and it's like, I've got to keep a level head on this. Like, I can't get sucked into this world of, and it proved a really good point, and I actually became quite a skeptic through that on that level. And yeah, it's crazy.
And it's funny because some people might consider me a skeptic, but I'm trying to just remain objective, right? I remember that first feeling I got when I was sitting in church when I was a kid, and I was watching all of these. I was talking about the shows I would watch earlier, and I started having these thoughts of, what? There's more out there than just humans on Earth. And I remember that feeling of, ooh, this feels like heresy. I can't talk about it. But the older I got, my mother was she was a sort of a missionary type. She would go to different countries, and the Southern Baptist Convention would pay her to do these, right? We weren't wealthy by any means, but she would go to Korea and China and these different countries with different religions, and she would come back and share that with me. And so I had that influence and she taught me how to be objective about our beliefs, and I don't know, I guess I was lucky, but I was thinking about that when you were describing just now your experience in the Central or South America. And
South America, yeah.
I think that's all we have to do. I don't think we have to feel guilty about our thoughts. I think as long as the end result is that we're objective, about it.
With mutual respect too. Like I think that
yeah,
clearly important. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing I really found. When I was in Colombia, speaking to indigenous people, asking them questions about what they'd seen and what stories they'd been passed down through hundreds of years and generations, and they're telling me that these things that they've been seeing and their forefathers have been seeing are UFOs, and some of the studies that we've been doing are kind of pointing in a slightly different direction. The last thing I'm going to do is disrespect them and say, that's not what you've been seeing. I'm going to take that on board, what they've said, take away other aspects, go away, put them together. And, it's, oh man, that's the last thing you want to do is disrespect some kind of cultural system that's been in place for generations, just by being naive or, it's horrible to think that you could do that to somebody. So, But it's like the same thing. The same, I've spoken to people in the experiencer community who have, in their opinions or whatever, their stories have been abducted by extraterrestrials, and I'm not going to say that they haven't. I'm going to fully believe that they believe what they're saying. The last thing for me to say is, no, you haven't. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a certain amount of level of where I will go and take away from that. I don't judge people. I listen and absorb what they're saying, and it doesn't come down to I do or I don't believe. I think it's more complex than that. I think you have to put it again on this little shelf in front of you and add it to other aspects of the phenomena and play around with it, wait over time to see what you can add to it or take away from it. It's not just a yes, I don't believe you. Yes, I do believe you. Boom, boom, boom.
That even circles back to what Artisan was saying earlier. There's so many different facets to the conversation. There could be the extraterrestrial. There could be the interdimensional. So maybe
absolutely
experiencing a type of interdimensional. This person would be experiencing an extraterrestrial. So they're
or a trickster.
Or a trickster. There you go.
Well, and it's funny you're talking about that, because Zmog in the chat saying our demons, the anti-angels, and kind of the way I've always thought of this is that even hell or demons are just entities that aren't experiencing the grace of the Creator. So it's not that they're different people. They're not. There's no special classification for demon.
Right?
They don't have special powers. They're just people that fell out of the grace of the Creator. And I keep saying Creator because, I obviously don't want to offend people of other religions, or I don't want to say God and then assume that the God I worship is it's not their God. So I typically try to say the Creator, which I think is probably a more accurate term. But anyway, I think demons, or if they exist, and they could, that they're just, again, they're just entities that are that aren't currently, accepting, the role of the Creator, and they may be like tricksters, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. It's another possibility. Yeah, we have to. Yeah, we can't take anything off the table until it's proven to be 100% false, and this is it. This is why the conversation can go around in circles from many different angles with many different people who look at it from multiple religious angles, multiple non-religious angles, scientific angles, whatever you want to call it. Everyone's got a name for it. And at the end of the day, none of us know what it is. So, let's not argue between ourselves about that. Let's all join together and kind of go past that, and it seems to be quite difficult.
Well, I think it's great that you've been doing those shows. And you had one season already out, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was never meant to be like a big production or anything. It was an investigation into something genuinely anomalous, and it just happened that we filmed so much footage and found that it would make good content for other people to see, that we did put it out, and we put it out independently. We had options to put it out through bigger networks and stuff, but we wanted to put it out as it was and how we did it and experienced it, because we know that you put anything out on a big network, they start calling the shots and changing the narrative and the way it looks and that. And we didn't want to do that. And the same going into next year. It's all self-funded. It's all independent. And I think it's just going to highlight really good scientific, investigative work in a completely different environment, certainly from where I live anyway, in the north
That's
of
the thing. You
England.
mentioned you went down to Colombia before?
Yeah.
What do you
I was
have any
gonna
other
ask you,
locations for this season?
It's similar location is kind of our base of operations. It's a small I say it's a small valley in rural Colombia, just on the edge of the Andean plateau. We have a 9,000 foot mountain with a short couple of kilometer valley with another peak. And the peaks are kind of, one is really highly charged on a kind of positive scale. Another is negatively charged. We've got sulfur, underground sulfur rivers. It almost forms this big battery. This is kind of what we've kind of tried to kind of figure out, but it spits these incredible lights out, which again, for 400 years have been called spirits, have been called UFOs, have been called entities and all these kind of things. And we're trying to like get to the bottom of it. But my point of view, these are some kind of very rare earth lights to some degree, with highly charged plasma possibly involved. And, you know, we've been limited in the kind of scientific sensor systems that we've been utilizing in the first season. We're hoping to have some more next season, but this could be a multi-decade project. If you look at things like Project Hestalen in Norway that started in the early 80s, that is still ongoing now, that's a 40-year-old study. So we're not rushing in there trying to get everything done on a budget of zero, but it's a very, very fascinating subject and a phenomena that we witnessed ourselves when we were there. So, yeah.
Very cool.
Can I give you an admission? I haven't seen it yet.
That's all right.
So,
I'll tell you what, I'll send you a copy.
Oh, I was going to ask you where you could find it, because I briefly looked for it before we started, and I was just wondering where you could find it.
It's available on Vimeo. It's only on Vimeo at this point. Episode 1 is completely free to the public.
Vimeo. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we put episode 1 out for anybody that kind of watches the first episode and gets a taste for it. And then wants to go and purchase the rest of the season, they can. It's a 7 or 8 episode season. And you know, I'm going to be biased, but I think it's a really well done. We've got people from all aspects involved. We've got a 70-plus-year-old New York judge, female judge, who became part of the team. We've got people that worked in Space Command in the US, part of the team. We've got myself, Dan Zetterstrom from That UFO Podcast. We've got people looking into archaeology and stuff. It's a multifaceted team. And half of the story is just about the way this team gels and develops looking into the phenomena. So it's really...
Did you say you have a base camp type area that you stay in?
Yeah, we actually had this like 100-year-old Colombian mansion that was our base of operations, which is incredible, in the middle of the valley in front of both mountain peaks. It was just an adventure. But the serious work was done.
Vision of a vacant El Chapo property. They're basically like villas. The mansions down there are they're basically like villas, aren't they?
Oh, they look beautiful, but the inner workings is just falling apart. So
yeah, I have a friend.
It's part of the romance of it, you know.
I have a friend who lives here, but he's sort of a subcontractor of ours, and he goes to Guatemala, and I helped him design his house that they're building down there. And it's amazing to see the difference in the way the normal common people live, and then you have these villas where the cartels live or whatever.
I can tell you, Tony, you would have hated it. You would have hated it, man. There was one point where we had to go outside and knock on a certain part of the wall to make the electrics work in the house, and it was
no, I love it.
It was weird.
We're too spoiled here in the United States.
No, I agree with that. We had to make it work, and we did. And like I said, it was all part of the adventure. So
I'm surprised you had electricity. No, I'm just kidding.
No, we didn't have hot water a lot of the time. I'll tell you that.
You should take one of the little tankless electric water heaters with you when you go in your luggage and hook it up.
I tell you what, if you let me share my screen, I can play a few minutes of just a random scene if you want.
No, that would be great. That'd be awesome. I was going to ask you. That was one of my questions.
Give you a little exclusive of one of the
Y'all are
episodes.
picking out my questions before I can even ask them.
Now, when you said that you had two mountains and you have one that's positively charged and one negatively charged, you're already reminding me of electrogravitics to begin with.
There you go, man. This is the thing. Like I said, this is why we want to get more science involved as we keep continuing to investigate it. So,
are there any active volcanoes or
nope.
even
no volcanoes in the vicinity at all? And I'll play this clip, and then maybe I'll play, if I can think, I'll try and maybe play the light phenomena clip. But
over 3,200 meters up in the air, we are at the top of La Pena de Huayca. We've been down to the Mirador, which I thought was very powerful. Just you can't see it, but over this way is Mohoy, which is the place we were at a few days back, which is kind of the seeding hill of this one, and the lights will travel across and come to this hill. Currently, I'm standing in a positive magnetic anomaly. Mohoy is in a negative one, and the lights tend to come towards where I am.
That was from season 1.
This is season 1. This is like part of episode 5 or something like that.
I definitely think there's something going on in the valley. If you look at Project Hestal, it's been going on since the early 80s, and they've added equipment over the years and really refined their investigating. And I think that's what's needed here. There are so many similarities. I'm not saying it's exactly the same phenomenon because we just don't know.
I don't know the geomorphology of the area, or much less when rocks and when ground compress and heave with the freeze-thaw action. But if you have movement there, you're creating energy. Energy is being conserved, and then it releases. So that could very well be it.
I think those two lights coming together might then possibly interact with that mountain magnetically, and is thrust on a circular course around the mountain, sometimes back and forth from Mohoy to Huayca.
Whilst exploring this area and this valley, we also mapped out the data from the geomagnetic surveys that identify anomalies, both positive and negative. It turns out that the peak of Mohoy is in a negative magnetic depression, and the peak of La Pena de Huayca is in a positive magnetic region.
But it does seem like Huayca and Mohoy, their magnetic fields are a little different. If you had drastic shifts in dry and wet, I think that's where you get the greatest potential to have activity.
So what we might be seeing is a kind of electric flow created that allows the ovni or the balls of light to travel that path from Mohoy to La Pena de Huayca.
If you can make a case for a large enough gradient or a similar gradient in magnetometer readings as in Hesdalen, then I think you have a wonderful case here.
There you go.
Well, that's awesome. I love the scientific approach to that.
Yeah, that's why when I went in, being a UFO researcher, as I may say, then, I was very worried that being in a place where this has been reported for hundreds of years as UFOs and stuff, I'd be like entrenched in that kind of mindset. And I surprised myself by being very science-based and very rational with everything that I was experiencing out there, because it was all so eye-opening, and, traveled halfway around the world to go there. But yeah, it was interesting. And yeah, I mean, anyone that watches the series, I think, will come to the good conclusion that it needs more scientific study with more sensor systems, more scientific equipment. And that's what we're aiming to do come April 2023. So, yeah.
I have a quick question about that clip. There was one image that showed the lights in the sky, and there was a little bit of kind of rainbow refraction on the bottom. Was that a time-lapse image?
It is a time-lapse image from Project Hesdalen in Norway from the 80s.
Okay.
That's what we were working with, that kind of similarities based on the decades of research and work that they'd done based on this strange light phenomena, plasma phenomena. That's what we're kind of working off to kind of compare what we're seeing. Even though it's not completely the same, that's the closest we've got to any kind of scientific studies that have been done previously. So that's kind of the first step for trying to understand what we've been researching.
I guess just to go with that a little bit more, have you looked into how pyramids influence magnetic fields?
Not personally, no. And I think season 2, we are getting more people who have looked into kind of ancient structures and stuff when it comes to pyramids and stuff like that. That's going to be
There
touched
might be a
upon.
relationship, you know.
This
and
is
when
the
it
thing. We're
Yeah.
open to everything, man. Like I
Well,
said,
yeah.
season 2 could take us another step. 2024, we could do season 3 with another. We've got our core team, but we're bringing in new people each time, and it could be a decade worth of study, and that's exciting. I'm not.
Did you witness similar lights? Did you? Witness?
Yeah. So towards the end
That's
of the
awesome.
trip, the majority of the team had left because the actual filming and that was over, and it was just myself and the main guy that organized it. We're just spending a night at his place, which is opposite the mounting, and he literally just came running into me and it's like, come and check it out. There's lights on the mounting, and we observed it for a couple of hours, and it was orb-like lights on a flat face on the mountain where there's no physical way people could get there, and it was spitting out like streaks of light and moving, and it was phenomenal. And it's in the final episode of the series. We have no idea what it is. To me, I think based on my research that I've done since into Earth lights, that's where I'm kind of putting my money, as it were. But again, I don't know.
I really want to give you a compliment, because I really think Brandon Fugel should have taken this more of a scientific approach like this than he has. And I made him mad at me once by saying that, but on Twitter. But but I think that some of these investigations like start off with the bias, and then it either goes more in the direction of the bias, or if it's, what I mean, there's nowhere in the middle. There doesn't seem to be anything less than their expectation to be drawn. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
that.
The first episode, which is the free episode available to the public, we actually go and interview a local who's been researching this for about 40 years. And he goes into UFOs and portals and all this kind of stuff. And so we work back from there going, wow, they're big claims. And we work backwards. And then about halfway through the season, we're presented with a video that locals have taken of these very strange blue lights that are emanating from the ground. And so as much as we're looking at the big picture of what's happening on the mountains, we still go and investigate this other case as well and actually get to the bottom of it. I'm not going to spoil any spoilers there, but we work out these things scientifically and methodically, as non-scientists. Yeah, we got a couple of people with PhDs and stuff, but yeah, it's just boots on the ground work, can't beat it.
Well, I do think those who will maintain an objective outlook will be those who last, who will be the mainstays,
yeah,
like people like Avi, obviously are taking a very scientific approach, which I think is needed. You need those types along with the people who, I don't know, have a desire. To me, what is that? What would you call it if you have the desire to find, extra, to find what's out there, but you maintain objectivity like you are. It seems to me, just from seeing that clip, I get the sense that you have a desire to know more if there's more, but you're maintaining an objective look at it.
I mean, I think you said it fine just there. I don't know if there is one word to kind of explain it, but yeah, and that's the thing. And like I said, I surprised myself because I wanted to go out there and be like, hey man, there's UFOs flying over this mountain, like it's amazing. Of course I would love that to be the case, but when you're out there, you have to do it justice. You have to realize that you're out there for 2 weeks, halfway around the world. You can't just be all half-ass it, and so I learn a lot about myself doing these kind of things as well, and that's half the picture as well for me.
Well, I think that's important, having that drive, like the inner will, right? And maybe some might call it passion. Like you're passionate about the topic,
Passion
but at the
is a
same
good word.
sense, you need to be like objective.
Yeah.
Passionately objective.
Absolutely. And it helps having good team around you as well. We were very blessed to have such a diverse team from all over the world, different age groups who did look at things from a different perspective, and the conversations that we had off camera really helped us establish kind of the way we were going to work through this project in the 2-week period that we had out there, and it all fell into place, and we were very, very lucky to have that outcome.
You know, something just occurred to me. What if these beings are looking for people like you who are honestly searching, and they will expose themselves to that group of people before the you know what I mean? I wonder if that's a possibility. In other words, you find that the lights are partially nature, but maybe they're influenced. Maybe they're influencing nature to send a signal or something like that. Something is.
Well, and that's where the magnetic anomalies could act as, in quotes, portals between the dimensions. And if they wanted to send out some type of like energy or, hey, come look over here signal, maybe they're sending out a light for you to check out. I'm just throwing out maybes and ifs, and I don't know,
Yeah, absolutely. And these were conversations we had quite like when I first witnessed the lights at the end of that trip, and I was blown away by what I was seeing. Like, I can't quantify what I'm seeing right now, and it took me months to even think like about the possibilities, and I wanted to break it down to the most explanatory basic science, and I still kind of don't know what it could be, but I just want it can't be that weird. It can't be that weird. I'm 45 years old and I've never seen anything strange in my life, but I've had conversations for years of people that have, and I'm like, well, why have I never seen anything? But I've always been objective and open-minded and all this kind of thing, so I don't know, man. It's weird.
But you saw the lights last
night. It may be that they dwell on a realm that we can't. It's like, I think you've mentioned this in your books, Alexei, or pointed out that we only see a certain spectrum. We can only sense a certain spectrum, and maybe they're using this as a
could be
a telegraph or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's definitely spectrums, right? We have the sound spectrum, we've got the visual spectrum, but we also have a consciousness spectrum that our brains operate on. So that's just another spectrum that I don't think science has looked into enough yet.
Absolutely agree on that point. Because people talk about consciousness, but what really is it, and how do you break it down? How do you look at the different aspects of it from one side to the next? It's an enigma.
Definitely. And the way I've come to kind of realize is I consider it flows of space-time. And so there's different conscious fields that exist within time, because the Earth has its own field that flows around it. The sun has its field. The galaxy has its field. At the end of the day, our greatest orbit of infinity has its field. There's so many different fields, you could say, of experience that exist.
I like the sound of that. It's so poetic. But
in my mind, I have this equation that consciousness is, the physical body plus the spiritual entity. Both of those have to come together to make the consciousness work. That's the way
I could go on it, but like the human body evolved to the natural flows of space-time that existed before the body existed. So like there were these flows of space-time, and then now we've evolved to detect this reality that we see. But that all comes from natural flows of space-time to begin with. Like, what came first, the chicken or the egg, or the human body and conscious fields? I would argue that conscious fields came first, and then the human body evolved to detect certain fields within it.
Yeah, I mean, it all sounds so good to me, and I wouldn't even begin to try. But this is the thing, I'm so honest that I'd be like, that sounds so wonderful, but do I understand it? No, but I think that's a good thing to instead of just being like, that's cool, but I agree. It's like, well, dude, these are why we have different people from different aspects and different areas looking at this thing, because we can all come together and bring our positive attributes together to become every part of the puzzle that we need, and so that's awesome. I mean, that's
what makes a good team in any sport, in anything.
And the reason I'm a bit skeptic about disclosure is because I personally have believed for a long time that we weren't created with the ability to understand, or that in this lifetime, this reality, we won't get that answer that we're seeking, because we weren't meant to. That we have to pass over to the next. For me, it's in my religion, it's one thing, and someone else's religion, it's another. That when I pass on, then that will be when I get the discovery, or I'll see the truth.
That resonates with me, because a few years ago when I first started coming out publicly and I started Disclosure Team, that's what I was focused on. But even within a short amount of time, in a few years, my shift has changed. Disclosure Team, the name has stuck. But to me, disclosure isn't about that anymore for me, that final answer, because we might not get it. What it is to me now is about connections. I've connected with so many people around the world, and I know it sounds like cliche and mamby-pamby, but like, I'm just genuinely glad to be a part of this process, and anything I can add to it, then, you know, so be it. And if it means that things get disclosed way past when I've gone because of a small piece that I may have been contributed to or something, then there you go. You know, at least I've tried. You know, that's all it comes down to.
I mean, even if the things you're presenting get taken off the table, at least you now know we should take this off the table. You know,
exactly.
Like, so any action that people do is helping move it forward.
Yeah, but even if it's a positive conversation that inspires somebody else to take it somewhere else in the future, like however small a cog it is in this massive machine, then so be it. I'm just happy to be a part of that.
It's funny how our belief systems work, though, because I haven't met anybody in my mind that's qualified to take my thoughts off the table yet.
There you go. There you go. And that's cool, man. That's why we're all different. And I love that, man. It'd be a hell of a lot more boring if we were all the same.
Yeah.
But I think some thoughts are hard to take off the table, though. Like, can you ever, could you physically design a test to take off the interdimensional hypothesis?
Not as far as I've seen. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, that's the fun thing about it, isn't it? Like, certain things take up more space.
But for somebody like but for somebody like me who believes in a creator, I believe those dimensions were created for this purpose,
right?
To separate certain entities from others, you know, and that's why I don't worry about whether I'm going to get disclosure or not. And this is why you can understand maybe why I'm disappointed when somebody says we've had disclosure, because I don't think it's possible at this point in time. Just because of where we are as humans, you know.
And that's fine. And that's down to it's individual interpretation, isn't it? And that's fair enough.
Yeah, and I don't expect anybody else to think like that. I'm not saying I expect people to think like me.
No, absolutely.
I'm sharing. It's like you said. I'm just sharing where I am, you know, at the moment.
Sometimes I think bold statements that are made are really there just to push people in a positive direction by making a positive statement. Like, come on, if we keep working at this, we will get further down the road. And I think, for example, like when Lou Elizondo said, we've had disclosure, and, you know, he kind of did reiterate that it was the government had admitted that there are genuine videos of genuine UAP. Like, I mean, that's good enough for me to keep me going. Yep, this is good. I'm going to keep pushing and keep going. Like, you know,
it's the green light.
Yeah, but UAPs are unidentified. So.
That's the thing. But then we spend too much time looking at the vernacular and the phonetics of these kind of things.
Yeah, but you can use the vernacular to say things.
You can, and I get that. I
again, I love Lou. I love you, Lou. I love you, man. I'm not talking about Lou. I'm talking about the concepts behind. Yeah. You know, I still think he's doing a great job, and he's doing what he has to do. Whatever it is, he's doing what he has to do.
Well, I always circle back to Galileo Project. The fact that his saying, "Hey, we've done this," you know, now Harvard has set up a program to look into it. I mean, that's a big step, and that can't be taken away. You know, that's a huge step.
Absolutely. And I've had a couple of conversations with Avi recently, one last week, and he's just so confident about the work that they're doing. And I mean, that's awesome to see, isn't it? It's not like they're just sitting back and be like, well, let's wait and see. But he's just like, yep, I'm hoping we get something in next year, and boom, boom, boom. And it's like, that's the kind of positive attitude I like. Whether it means we get anything or not, it, you know, is a different story. But I think just positivity goes a long way for people.
I want to see Avi dressed up like Jacques Cousteau when he goes on. I just want him to be my new Jacques Cousteau in search of the.
You think he'll be on the boat?
Don't you? Oh, he wouldn't miss that, would he? Would he miss that?
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to speculate on what he will or will not do.
Well, maybe the boat, maybe the ship will have a helicopter pad. You know, he can come and go as he needs to.
Come and go as he wants. Yeah.
I can't imagine him like, at least. Oh, now you've ruined it for me, Alex. I had this vision of him out on the, you know, in front of the ship. come
My
on,
vision
we're
is
gonna
staying with the
find it.
office and sending the team out on the boat.
Huh.
But I don't know. Does he still teach courses like in lectures? I mean, because if you're teaching lectures, you can't really be out in the middle of the
Well,
Pacific
but he
Ocean
could do it
on
during the
your boat.
summer when they're out.
Yeah.
Right. I could schedule this for him if he needs me to.
You can always teach through a Zoom call too from the
There you
boat.
go.
Yeah.
There you go. Oh, it's all too much fun, isn't it? But
Hey, if
what
you
we
can't
need to
have
keep
fun, then you know
Yeah.
what can you do?
Let's see. Let me check my questions before I'll let you go. We've already. Oh, we talked about what projects you've got coming up. When's the second season going to be released?
So I fly out to Colombia on April the 5th of 2023. We film for about 12 days. And I'm thinking episode 1 will be released around the end of June, early July of 2023. So I'm actually doing a couple of conferences next year, speaking about the investigations and stuff. And I think we're aiming to release episode 1 at the end of June while I'm in, fingers crossed, I'm going to be in Roswell next year at a symposium. So hopefully that'll be a nice time to kind of air it to the public.
It's a marathon. You've already got 6 months planned out. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you
Hopefully.
have people producing or investing in the project?
No, it's all in-house. It's all done by us, the team, and the guy that films it is the same guy that edits it. It takes 3 months out of his life, if not longer, to do it all himself. And we're lucky enough that he's very good at it. We've got people that have produced the music for us. And it's all out of our own pocket. So, you know, season 1, we didn't even break even at the end of the day. There's no money involved. It's just purely getting the passion and the project out there to, you know.
I challenge Brandon Fugel to.
Hey, we'd love it. Hey, anybody out there that looks at it or hears about it who wants to, you know, do something for us, then great. But, you know, like I said, we're looking at more sensor systems and scientific equipment for season 2. We're in really good negotiations with people who maybe provide that to us. So who knows what's going to come, you know?
What's his name? Jim Segala. You know, I worked with him on the UAP Society balloon launch.
Yeah.
He has good equipment that might be able to help you.
There we go, man.
Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely people out there that have been designing special equipment for it, you know?
Yeah. Appreciate that. I've made a note of that because that's the kind of thing, you know, we want to do it grassroots. We don't want anybody to come in with huge financial donations that then start taking it in a different direction. It may get to that eventually in a few years' time if we don't feel like we're getting anywhere because we just cannot afford to put in that extra bit of funding that requires the extra systems that we may need to kind of analyze this phenomena any further. We'll see. And this is kind of why we're not rushing anything. We want to do things right and we want to do it from the ground up. So
I think as long as those investors stay sort of silent, like silent partner types.
There are ways to do it. But again, we're just going to be slow, cautious, and just see how things go and not rush this kind of thing. Like, because I don't mind putting up money to go out to Colombia and investigate this kind of thing off my own, you know, pocket. It may get to a point where that becomes unrealistic as a father and a family man and things like that. But until that happens, you know, I like having control.
For a while there, crowdsource funding was popular. You don't seem to see that much.
You don't. I mean, Dan, part of UFO, that UFO podcast, he became part of the team through crowdfunding. You know, the viewers and listeners from that podcast crowdfunded for him to come out last year. So that was great. But, you know, that was just one small aspect of it. If we were to crowdfund for the whole project, yeah, that could be good. That could be another, maybe that's something season 3 would become if we kind of need to get to that tens of thousands of dollars kind of level because of the equipment we need. But this is what I mean. It's like step by step by step. We're not going to go step by massive leap kind of thing because we don't want to rush this kind of investigation. And we're lucky to have the team members that we have who bring really good things to the table anyway. So yeah.
So did you say the community's supporting you there? Is there like a small village there, or is it just really out in the middle of?
Well, we're very lucky because the guy that runs the whole project is a friend of mine, Ashley Cowie, who he used to do programs on Travel Channel. He's an archaeological investigator, and he actually lives in the valley now in Colombia. He's based there, and he's built this huge wooden house that he lives in, but he's now built a separate lodge, which is his UAP watching lodge that we all go out and stay at. And so we have a base of operations no matter what. So we're very lucky to have him out there 24/7, being able to.
Yeah, it's good to have that.
He
sort
knows
of
the
resource.
locals. He knows the local town people, and his wife is Colombian, so we have that resource, like you say. And so we're very lucky that it kind of gives us an in. We're not just some random gringos turning up in a strange Colombian like rural village going, "Hey, UFOs!"
Hey.
So yeah,
Oh,
it's
that's funny.
it's a lot more subtle than that.
Well, do you have anything else, Alexei?
Nope, I've covered all the questions on my list.
You covered most of mine.
Great minds
I
think
didn't have a
alike.
list. Partisan, did you get through all the questions you had on your? You made a list.
I did. Oh well, I usually do. See, I got a compliment from Kurt John Mungle too on this.
Hey, there you go.
I usually, that's because he asked me to send my questions, and it was like, anyway, I shouldn't brag on myself, but anyway, I do have a spreadsheet I do questions on, and we covered them. That's why I was asking if you had anything else, Alexei, or
No,
if you
I
have
think,
any closing thoughts.
My main
Vinnie?
question was like, what do you think they are essentially? And you kind of answered that already, like leaning towards a certain interdimensional aspect,
Yeah.
but still
Yeah.
keeping an open.
Absolutely.
mind.
I mean,
Yeah.
it could flip and change.
Yep.
However information and data comes to me through conversations I have with people like yourself and others. So that's the thing. Like you said, it's just best to keep an open mind.
Well, I don't know if you've seen, but I designed an interdimensional telescope, so that might be
Did it?
something to build and take out there.
Dude, send me the details. I'm up
I
for
will.
looking at stuff like that. Thank you so much. Of course.
I think the thing that makes it complicated is, like, the way I think of it is that, if say we did have something in the 40s that we back engineered, that, you know what I mean, that doesn't mean that, again, the entities that we're dealing with now are the same. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And so it's a very dynamic, to me, it's a very dynamic thing and fluid. And, anyway, that's getting back into what we were talking about. But when you think about the Earth, how young the Earth is, well, how young it is, but how late of a bloomer it is, right?
Sure.
The Earth is a late bloomer as far as the universe is concerned. And to think about all the millions of years that other beings could be evolving is just fascinating. But
Absolutely.
we've already covered that. Sorry, I was about to dredge up old
What do you
talk.
think about, I guess one more question. I know we've kind of been going for a while here. Maybe start to close it out. But what do you think about cosmology, just in general? Like the ages of Pisces and Aquarius, or if you want to consider like a Hindu, like the Yuga system. Do you have any thoughts on that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not something that I've studied, and I would never claim to know anything about it. But again, when I've had conversations with people where they bring things up like that, or they bring something up that's outside of the UFO subject, maybe it's something to do with the paranormal or another subject, and you start thinking that maybe there are crossovers between these kind of subjects. And again, I'm not afraid to have that kind of conversation. So when you say something like cosmology and you look at that and think about that big picture out there, then it's fascinating, the concepts, but I've not even kind of formulated what concepts I should start
I used
thinking.
to make fun of it almost when I was studying, because I was an astronomer, and astronomy is very physics, very material, very like real. And then you think cosmology, it's like, oh, well, you're this sign and you're that sign in my horoscope.
That's
But
the
now I've
thing.
actually started looking into it. It's like, this actually makes sense now.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like my experience with that side of things was looking in the tabloid newspapers with the cosmology things in the back of the paper, and it's like, I speak to people who are into kind of that kind of thing and star seeds and all that kind of thing, and I would never disrespect anybody by just throwing it back in their face like I don't believe in that, because it's not something I've looked into. So yeah, that's the thing. I keep an open mind, and if I ever do find time to go and study that kind of thing, then maybe at the end of that I'll have more of an answer to that kind of question. Do you know what I mean? It's such a broad scope of a subject that you can link up to other kind of aspects of what we're talking about. So yeah, fascinating. It's fascinating. That's it.
I try to keep an open mind as far as cosmology goes. I try to just imagine that if I'm an early human, that I'm just mapping out the sky. There's no harm in that, right? There's no harm in labeling constellations. There's no harm in any of it.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean it's 100% scientific, but you know what I mean? So it's sort of one of those areas I was talking about earlier that's sort of a dynamic. I'm sure there's a lot of science that crosses over. It's just been one of those things that we've kind of put in categories over the.
Yeah.
Part of like space studies, astronomy took over, and astrophysics took over, right? It used to be cosmology, but then it was like, well, we developed the telescope, so now we're going to do astronomy.
Yeah.
I think it's like anything. If you see people charging extortionate amounts of money, claiming that they can tell you this or that based on your star sign, then that's when red flags start coming up for me.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So there is a fine line between different aspects of the same subject.
Definitely.
For me, that's why I mentioned the innocent side of it, where people were just basically trying to, it's almost like just map out the sky. What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
We have different, we have precession of the stars and all. It doesn't mean we have to make predictions based on it, personal predictions,
Yeah.
Good
so
for farming. Good for farming, like when to plant the crops.
Exactly. Yeah.
There you
go. We Southerners just call it the Farmer's Almanac,
I like that. Productivity.
That's right. Doesn't mean I'm going to go, sacrifice a calf. Well, this has been actually a lot of fun. It's been, I had almost gotten to kind of burnout on the whole UFO thing, and now I'm revitalized. Thank you, Vinnie.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you so much. Yeah. And I really do appreciate it. I really do. I'm always up for talking to it with people, but sometimes the conversation do go kind of down the same direction, and a lot of focus does tend to be on the government kind of thing. So for me to be able to talk about my investigative work in Colombia, and that is always just a breath of fresh air. So thank you guys so much.
Can you maybe you can come back after season 2?
Love to.
We'll
absolutely.
Talk about that. See if you got any updates from the mountain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love that 100%. I could talk about that till the cows come home.
That's very cool. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate both of you, and it's been a wonderful time.
Thank you so much,
hang out
Tony.
for a minute afterwards.
Yeah.
I better shoot off because it's just gone midnight. I'm on.
That's right. You're 5 hours ahead. That's right. Well, thanks, Vinnie.
But listen, message me if you have any questions. I'll send you a copy of the series. So yeah, thank you again so much, guys. It's been a pleasure, man, and we'll talk again, no doubt.
Yeah,
thank you, Vinnie. All right, cool. We'll see you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, that was awesome. And thank you for co-hosting.
Yes, sir.
You bailed me out on many questions again.
Passion. You got to have passion if you're going to do something like this.
That's right.
You have to have that passion. If not, you're just wasting your time.
Sometimes my brain gets cross-wired from trying to, I feel like I'm running the show when I should really just forget about that part of it and keep my mind focused on, I'm reading the chat. I'm trying to do the right thing and you kind of lose your thought process every now and then. But that's why I like you helping me with these things. I really appreciate it.
Well, I'm just glad that other people are considering the interdimensional hypothesis, because you write out all this work in general. A person writes out all this work, and now it's like time to go see what other people think. And it's like, it's good to have that.
I think honestly, most people do have these thoughts.
Right.
They just maybe are afraid to talk about them. I think as humans, we have this instinct, right? Instinctually, I think we know there's a creator or something out there, and we know that there's different dimensions. We know, you know what I mean? Yeah. I think we instinctively know and have this intuition, but people just, don't want to talk about it necessarily. They're afraid to, I think.
it's easy
Yeah.
to live in the human bubble, right?
Yeah.
Like the only thing that really matters is human society, meaning like the things that you're born into, you know,
The
like
9 to 5 job,
9 to 5 job. What's your
gotta
job? How
have
much money do you have? What kind of car are you driving? Like it's so
a
easy to
dog and two kids, and you know, the vacation home maybe if you're
it's hard to
lucky.
see, but I mean that's like something we've created as the ideal life. That's not necessarily even in tune with creation.
Those are some of those delusions we were talking about in earlier chats.
I didn't bring up the word. We're good. You know, people know.
Well, thanks. We're going to end it here. And thanks, everybody, for coming. And we'll see you on the next one.